Hi everyone, today I would like to share with you the tip how you can create a running average in Power BI that also takes into account zero values without writing complicated DAX measure. Normally creating a running average in Power BI is tricky, especially if you want to count periods with zero sales or any other values. In my case, I'm working with complaints. With DAX measures, it usually skips those zeros unless you write a complicated DAX measure. However, with visual calculation, it becomes much simpler. And today, that's the practical example that I would like to show you where visual calculation is very helpful. Let's have a look at my example. So here's the graph with my complaints. And as you can see, I have 45 complaints in January, and then I have no complaints up until April. So what I would like to do, I would like to take into account those months when I had zero complaints as well. So it should not skip those February and March zero values, but take them into account and calculate running average by taking them into account as well. First of all, let's have a look at the measure that I usually use when I'm creating a rolling average. So I'm using average checks that accepts first argument as a table. In that table, this is where I'm utilizing these dates and period functions that helps me to move my reporting period always by 6 months. And then I using the number of complaints measure that is very basic measure that just sums all my number of complaints. So if I bring this to my visual as a line, so this is what I'm getting. So it's the same visual that I previously showed you. So it cannot handle those zeros correctly. So let's have a look how I can fix this. First, I'm going to replace number of complaints without zero with another measure that is number of complaints plus zero. It will start showing me zero complaints for those months when the number of complaints was zero. So when I didn't have any complaints. And now I can start using visual calculation. So I'm clicking on three dots, going to new visual calculation, and here I can select moving average. 6-month rolling average. I'm gonna write that it's visual calculation. And now it accepts two arguments. So for the field, I need to insert that field that I'm using in the graph. So it can only work with measures or fields that are available on your visual. So you cannot bring something that is not on your visual. Hence, I had to add that number of complaints with zero in here. And then as for the window period, I'm just going to select 6. I don't need to write months or anything because my axis already has a grain at the monthly level. And that is how it's done. So I'm just creating that. And I just need to move it across to the line. $45 in January. In February, I had 0. So 45 plus 0 and divide by 2, that's 22.5. So that's correct. So and so on. So you can see that it's actually calculating it correctly.
Of course, sometimes you don't need to show the number of complaints. All you want to show is just your actual rolling average. As I mentioned, you still need to have the measure field that you are working with, that you use in your visual calculations. Hence, you can move it across to tooltips. So that way you only displaying the rolling average, but your tooltips are still available, and hence you still can utilize them in the visual calculation.
Of course, I could have written a little bit more complicated DAX measure by modifying this measure. However, I have tested that at the actual project where I had to work with nearly 1 million of rows, and the performance wasn't great. However, when you are working with visual calculations, the performance is actually a lot better. Visual calculations run directly on the visual context, which makes them faster in many cases than writing a DAX measure that has to calculate across the entire model, such as million rows. This was the first time when I saw a practical benefit of using visual calculation over the measure in the real world. So thanks for watching, give it thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.